Closer every day to the roar of the crowds in Canadian Football League stadiums. Get your damn vaccines. Welcome inside. It is the breakdown right here on Canadian Football Perspective. That is at DT on SC. Derek Taylor. I am at TSN_Marsh. Marshall Ferguson. We thank you as always for tuning in, and we thank our good friends at Fox 40 for supporting the program. And of course, everything we're doing at CFP, their close vicinity line, is designed to help you return to play safely. For 15% off all your whistle needs, visit fox40shop.com and enter the code CFP15.
Did you pitch Fox 40, my other slogan for them? If you're going to blow something, why not make it a Fox 40? No?
Yeah, I went right to Dave Foxcroft, and he said, yep, we'll get that printed on all the T-shirts and sell them at the Fox 40 shop, and you can get 50% off of those by using promo code CFP50. And I've also cracked for myself here on the podcast today a Little Norway Pilsner from our good friends, of course, at Sawdust City. And they actually, last week on our happy hour tasting that I did with Sam Corbet, their brewmaster, we had their Tropical Storm Mojito IPA, and it's such an interesting beer, man. Like, I don't know if I've ever had something like that. And I've had a lot of different things from Ontario craft beer, and I like going to other provinces. I mean, when I'm in different places traveling on the road, when I was covering the Tiger Cats, and I would always go and check out, what was happening at a local craft brewery, or if you could go out to a pub and try something that was on tap that was around there. And I've never had anything like that Mojito IPA, mostly because I'm not a big Mojito guy, but I like IPAs and I like what Sawdust City does. So I gave it a shot. We talked about it. I took my first sip and I'm like, there's the lime. It's a little salty. And at the end, it was this super refreshing mint. And Sam Corbet, the brewmaster, said, yeah, we're going to crush it this summer with this beer. I'm like, yeah, also it's 6.9% alcohol content. And it's super smooth, and it just tastes like a summer afternoon. It's a cool creation. So they're doing some fun stuff there at Sawdust City, and as always, we thank them as well for supporting us. They're offering brewery fresh beer delivered directly to your door. You can visit their website at sawdustcitybeer.com, shop their wide variety of brews, and learn more. And I believe this is the last show that we're going to have with this promo code. We're getting a different promo code for May. So if you want to hold off, if you've already ordered with this one, which is CFP, to get free shipping on all orders over $100, you can do so. You can wait that out until May. I don't know what we're getting in May for a promo code, but I do know we're getting a different one. So we'll see where that ends up taking us. But it has been a fun month with Sawdust City as we introed them at the beginning of April. All right, that's my promo out of the way. Thank you to everybody that's hanging out with us here. DT, what's going on?
Not much. I was thinking how similar our journeys around the country are. You're sampling local microbrews. I'm sampling the Diet Pepsis that come from it. Is it the gun? Oh, is it from a bottle? Oh, this is interesting. Oh, okay. Look at this. It feels artificial. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's so similar, Marsh. We're just alike.
No, it's sad though. Like Ottawa has an incredible craft brewery scene that's around there. Okay. And my favorite thing to do when I go to Ottawa is to go to the craft beer market that's right next to TD Place. You've seen it, I'm sure, when you're there calling games. It's right on the corner, big red sign. It's where everybody tailgates. I remember going there after a Red Blacks playoff game, and basically the entire team was over there like 10 minutes after media availability. I'm like, okay, this is just where they do their post-game receptions. But the Red Blacks were over there, and they have a beer it's available at that craft beer market. And I think it's a French beer, and it's called La Trappe. I believe it's like Trappist, La Trappe, something like that, is 13%. And they give it to you in this little like half glass, almost like it's a brandy or a rum or something like that. But it is just, it's a beer. It's just like a triple IPA or something like that. And that one's pretty crazy. But yeah, if I had to power rank the craft beer, I would say in terms of like outside of Hamilton, Toronto, because obviously that's stuff that I have whenever from the LCBO here in Ontario, I'd say Vancouver is either 1 or 2 for me, just because of the rarity, the obscurity of going. I actually started this tradition when I go to Vancouver because the hours are so weird for somebody flying out from Hamilton, right? Like obviously the 3-hour time difference, but then the 5-hour flight. So we get there the day before the game, and then I'm tired by 7 p.m. because it's actually 10 p.m. And then I wake up at 3 a.m. because I usually wake up at 6 a.m. wide awake, and it's like, well, the game isn't for 18 hours, so what the hell am I going to do? And so I started doing this thing when I go to Vancouver where early in the morning I'll either go for a walk or a jog all the way around Stanley Park. Like I'll go down and hang out kind of down by the harbor as the sun's coming up, and then make my way all the way around the outside of the seawall. And then when you come on the backside there towards kind of Sunset Beach in downtown Vancouver, you can take for like $1.25 this little ferry that takes you over to Granville Island. And the first time I did this, I was just wandering by myself, as I'm wont to do when I'm traveling on the road as a young 20-something who's calling CFL games. And so I just, in the middle of the day, saw a ferry, saw that it said Granville Island. I'm like, hey, I've had their beer before. Let me pop over there. Hop on the ferry, go over to Granville Island, find the brewery, walk in. Just a wall of things I've never seen before. It was the best. It was like they had a maple Caddyshack, lager. They had a bubblegum this IPA. It was just like the weirdest, just design stuff. So Vancouver's pretty high up there. Ottawa is pretty high. And Montreal, it was one of the greatest things in Montreal is just being able to, if you Google like beer, just brewery or something, there are so many places in Montreal that are the size of a closet that you can go and sit down during normal times. You can go and sit down and there's about 20, 30 people in there. And then you can get up from that place after you have a local beer, walk 20 feet and there's another one. Like they all just feel like they're essentially the size of the first place you ever had a haircut. And they just all happen to be serving wings and beer and whatever French cuisine that they want. So it is fun traveling around. I have a lot of memories from doing that early in my 20s for sure.
Very cool. Very cool.
Let's dive into some CFL news and notes for you here. The mock draft is out, mock draft 2.0, and I wanted to just touch a little bit lightly on this. If people want to check it out in full, then go to cfl.ca, of course, and see what we have in store for you there. This year's tough, man. I know I complained about this the first time, so I'm not going to go into reruns here and continue to tell you how difficult it is to put this stuff together. But it really struck me the second time through because I like to try and refine the draft. And I honestly, for the majority of the top end of the mock draft second version here, 2.0, I was like, if I don't have great reason to take people out of where I've placed them in a bunch of these spots, I'm just not going to rip them out for the hell of it. Like I'm not going to go ahead and have to write that somebody's really dropped off after their shuttle time wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. It's like, they're still a very good player. They could go anywhere in the top 15 picks if I think they're a first round talent, depending on what happens in the NFL draft. Some guys might go high, some guys might drop way back. So I put it up there, and I still have Daniel Joseph going first from NC State, defensive end. It used to play at Penn State. Logan Bandy from Calgary to the Riders there with DT at number 2. And then Nelson Lacombo, a Sasky guy, of course, DB at number 3. I was a little hesitant on Nelson just because he measured in significantly smaller than I thought. And then I remembered just how good he is at covering ground for his size. It's just a tough year to be a defensive back. That might be a little bit of U Sports cheering going on inside of my soul that I refuse to move him from 3rd overall in that spot.
Yeah, I was just seeing Daniel Joseph, the brother of former top pick Faith Akakati.
Yes.
I wonder if the name Faith Akakati will reappear at some point during the podcast. Offensive line at number 2 for the Riders. Hey, they just brought in Evan Johnson to be right guard with Dan Clark and Brendan Labatt.
Yeah.
Johnson presumably would be the guy who would be the longtime guard when Labatt decides he's finished playing. They drafted a guy in the first round last year, and I can't believe I'm forgetting his name because he's from Saskatchewan. I
went there. I'm trying to think who you had there as well. I mean, I did this to you today on the Sports Cage when I was talking to you.
Matt
and I'm like,
Riley, cheapers.
Yeah, there you go. And I was going to say I did
Riley.
this to you when I was on the Sports Cage today, where I said, who's that running back from Winnipeg that hurt his ankle but played really good as the backup? And you nailed it right away. You're like, Brady Oliveira, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, like, I can't believe I didn't remember that. I'm like, I feel like my brain just blanked because I was thinking about Malik Irons as another young Canadian running back that was in last year's 2 years ago draft class, I should say. But and even then, like I say, hey, he played last year. No, he didn't. It was 2 years ago because we just completely have this void of 2020 in all of our brains. So yeah. I don't blame you for dropping out that name, even though it was last year through the draft. But yeah, Matlin Riley he's exceptional, and the Riders could go somewhere else. I basically just did that because I was looking at Darius Vladick and Dakota Shepley. Like, that was my reasoning, is that those two guys.
And Phil Blake, yeah.
Yeah, and Phil Blake as well in free agency to Toronto. So they're backfilling, and I think that I always say this, the draft is for value and free agency is for need. And so if I'm looking at value and you have the number 2 pick, depending on who you believe in or who you think could be in that spot comfortably, that you want to put them in a year or two or have them be an immediate backup like a Drew Desjardins was for Winnipeg when they won on their Grey Cup run, then I could see Logan Bandy being that for the Riders if they go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was trying to think as we've been talking what position the Riders would want to fill. The 19 draft, they used first and second round on receivers, guys that we were two very different receivers. 20 was offensive line. They don't have a lot of needs in their Canadian positions. They use free agency to go, hey, we can now go Canadian defensive back. So I don't know about Lacombo being in that spot. Linebacker, they may well have punted. Well, they have Canadian depth at linebacker. So if there was a top line will linebacker who's Canadian in the draft, it would be interesting. Defensive tackle, they seem like they're okay between Mac Henry, and it is Tuesday brain for me because I cannot remember the delightful young man who was the backup at defensive tackle for the Riders in 2020. I have to ask you about your number 4 pick.
Yes, yeah.
Ben Vladick, who we raved about last week.
Yep.
At 6'4" and 240. Do you think he's a linebacker in the Canadian Football League, or does he get moved up to be? I don't know if he could be an edge.
Yeah, he could totally be an edge. I made that pick with the methodology of, if you're going to invest the first overall pick in somebody that is as talented as Jordan Williams at East Carolina in 2020, then I would think that you would want to piece that together, obviously with what they've done with Bo Lacombo as well over there on the weak side. But I would look at BC as saying, if I'm in that front office, that, again, I don't think that you want to necessarily spend a draft pick on a guy who's ready to play. And again, whether or not he plays himself out and into the NFL draft or an NFL signing is a different discussion. But if he's going to be in the CFL, Ben Vladick, I look at it and think to myself, if I'm BC, I have somebody who's from British Columbia, who played at UBC, who, if he's in the CFL and he becomes a star and it's for any team that's not wearing orange, we're wrong for that. Like, you cannot allow that to happen with all of the roots. And you're trying to market your team, and the global draft, you get a Chinese player that's extremely attractive to the Chinese market there in Vancouver to be able to draw people out. And it's like, they're hitting all the notes of talent and demographic and age, trying to get younger. And Rick Campbell's going to bring in this. And they've got all these exciting coaches that they've added. And I'm just thinking Ben Vladick fits in that spot either behind or alongside, depending on what they do at will linebacker. I mean, what's to say that they didn't anticipate Ben Vladick becoming this guy? And I'm not saying he's going to be a day one starter, but what's to say in a year or 6 weeks into the season, whatever it might be, that Jordan Williams isn't a dynamic, speedy, getting to the quarterback off the edge, chasing around after running backs, will linebacker, and Vladick at that size is the middle linebacker, because he could be an Enoch Mwamba type guy between the tackles. If you pair him up with another Canadian, like, your ratio, you have crazy flexibility. There's no team in the CFL that can say first overall, fourth overall, both studs, both crazy athletic, both Canadian. So that was my thought. And again, some of the mock draft process, and I'm always transparent about this, is a decent helping of wishful thinking, because I just like to dream up this world in which Vladick and Jordan Williams are playing alongside each other and just dominating. Like, I love that idea. So that was why I put him to BC. All of those reasons combined in my mind were just kind of swirling. And I said, can I give it to them at 4th? And I was thinking, if you're going to go as a linebacker in the first round, you got to be pretty damn special. Well, Vladick's pretty damn special. So in my mind, it kind of fits. Yeah.
I feel like he is the most likely to, on special teams, grab somebody and throw him into the guy with the ball. Like, just pick him up and just, I missed him on the tackle. I'm just going to use this 200-pound defensive back and throw him 20 yards to knock the guy out. Yeah, that's a tackle to Ben Vladick. First down, Riders.
I'll say
that's just crazy
as well, that after I played with Wayne Moore at McMaster University, Wayne is now there as a running back, fullback type, and he's been a monster for them on special teams. And there's more names like that all over the league, depending on what your favorite style of Canadian special teamer is. If it's a Marco Dubois type who's crazy long and has some really good testing scores as well and can still be able to cover and can tackle even as a receiver, maybe that's your favorite. For me, what they've done in BC with some of the specials groups there, Frederick Shania is another linebacker from the University of Montreal that was there. I thought really highly of him coming out in the draft in what was a relatively weak linebacker draft that year. This one, I don't think is as weak as the year that Shania was drafted out of Montreal, but it's pretty close. And Vladick has separated himself by a decent margin. Ironically enough, the closest people chasing him down, I think, are Elliott Graham from UBC and Nick Cross from UBC. So that it's crazy to think that they have that many guys that are top 20, top 30 linebacker draft picks available, even though Elliott Graham, I think, played some defensive end as well from what I had seen. But that top four, that was the big shakeup for me, was putting Vladick in there. And it was trying not to force it just because I fell in love with what he did at the combine numbers. I tried to actually give it some process, but 5, I went Mohamed Diallo to Edmonton out of Central Michigan. Ottawa, I gave a receiver, DT. What do you think of that? I just felt like they deserved a receiver because there's Wesley Lewis, who they've drafted there out of, I think, Houston Baptist. And then there's also Dan Peterman signed in free agency. They've obviously got Sinopoli continuing to do his thing, but that's not going to last forever. They've got Coombs in there. Who else am I missing? I was looking at this the other day of the nationals that they have in terms of pass catchers.
As far as Canadians, that's the ones I can think of. But Coombs, Peterman. I mean, you have a host of guys that none of us have really heard of or seen much of yet, and then they have a couple of decent Americans to go with in Jalen Saunders and RJ Harris. That's a foundation. You would love to. Yeah, whoever it is going to get stuck at that Z position, right? Whoever you pick as a receiver, because you're probably not dislodging Harris or Saunders if they make it to the beginning of the season, because those guys are for real. So, but your point about Sinopoli, and I pray Anthony Coombs, someone just uses him. I just pray someone uses him better than he's been used in the past. Because I've seen him at his absolute finest. I always want someone to give him more to do, give him the Dembski role from Winnipeg, right? That kind of thing. So looking forward to that.
I was
disappointed. Needs talent.
Yeah, well, I was disappointed by Coombs and Hamilton, though. And I don't know if that was a role or a system thing or what, but I had visions of him from Toronto to Hamilton being able to do that Dembski type stuff, because Tommy Condell is as creative as anybody, including LaPolice. And I thought that would be more successful. He just never really found his groove. And then I think he got dinged for a couple of weeks there. So he didn't end up turning into what I thought. If he's going to do it anywhere, it's obviously going to be with LaPolice in Ottawa. But I mean, to your point about whoever gets taken there is going to end up wide side. I mean, you're looking at RJ Harris is going to play into the boundary, and then you're going to have Sinopoli, Saunders, insert name here. And that, I mean, Peterman could end up playing the Drew Wolodarski role of the wide side guy who's safe, reliable, gives you 10 to 15 catches a year. But I mean, he's to me, and again, I know I played with Dan Peterman at McMaster, but like Peterman is a in terms of production versus usage, he is above average production with below average usage from his time in Winnipeg. Now, maybe the thought there for LaPolice is let's go ahead and get Dan Peterman and we can use him in a more creative way. Maybe he becomes the guy that plays the Dembski role for all I know, because he's got that skill set too, which I think we all assume the tie between Dembski and Coombs is, well, Coombs has got to be the guy. It might end up being Peterman, and it might be Wesley Lewis on the outside with whoever they draft this year. But it's funny too, jumps out into my mind just talking about Peterman here. I'll never forget being in Winnipeg, 2018. I forget what the result of the game was, how it shook out, but I do remember two things. Okay. And these are both June Jones stories, so you'll enjoy these. Is that we end up going and doing the media availability. And then I said to Aaron Gogo, who I love very much, who's of course does a great job with the Ticats, all of their media, PR communications. And I said, Gogo, is there any chance you guys can give me a ride back to the hotel? Because they were just kind of grabbing a couple of cabs and whatnot. He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So doesn't a limo roll up to take us back? Because in Winnipeg, it's actually cheaper to take a town car or a limo back to your hotel than it is to wait for a cab. And yeah, that's a real
Seriously?
thing. Yeah, you can order.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's what I learned from Coach John Salavanis, who used to do color commentary with me, and I guess the Ticats found that out too. So, anyways, we're in the elevator, going down from the Bob Irving press box in Winnipeg, and we're going downstairs. And June's in the elevator with me, and we've always been pretty friendly, and he's obviously very open with his conversations on or off microphone. And he says to me, "Hey, did you play with that, what is it, Peters or Peter?" I said, "Dan Peterman?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Man, I liked him. I wish we would have taken him in the draft. I could have done some stuff with it." And June Jones was saying, and this is when Peterman is barely making an impact at all, but he's on the Winnipeg roster. And June, just out of nowhere, because we're in Winnipeg, is just thinking about the other team. And he says to me, "Man, I was campaigning to go get him. I really wish we would have picked him up." So that was the first thing. The second thing was that June Jones told me a story as we were on the ride back to the hotel about him being at SMU, George W. Bush rolling into practice because apparently, well, he didn't know him, but he said he just wanted to come watch some football. So he rolled into practice, and June hung out with him for a couple of minutes, said what's up, and all right, talk to you later. And he ends up having the president of the university come sprinting into his office. "George W. Bush was down here, and you didn't tell me you have any idea the amount of alumni donorship that we could gain if we could access what he has in terms of relationships with people." And of course, this guy's just thinking money, 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 money. And June said to me, "I didn't give a shit about money." He's like, I was hanging out with George W. Bush. It was cool. It was in my office. I didn't ask anything of him. And so he ends up giving George W. Bush a locker in the SMU locker room with the coaches. So W had a locker, and W was allowed to go in there with a swipe pass and everything else and work out at SMU's team facility whenever he wanted, because June hooked him up. Didn't tell the president, didn't tell any chancellors or anything from the school, just hooked W up. And then the one day he said he was in his office, and he ended up having W just hanging out for a couple of minutes. And then I guess the president comes down and, straightens his tie up. "Mr. President, it's great to see you." And tries to talk to him and everything. Leaves the room after a couple of minutes of trying to sweet talk him. "We'd love to have you come to a donor relationship meeting," and walks out of the room. And June goes, W turns around at me and he goes, "You like that guy?" And June's like, "Hell no." W goes, "Me either, and I ain't giving him a cent."
Oh no!
It's one of those things where June was just connected with the quarterback at the University of McMaster University, or is the play-by-play guy as much as he connects with a former president of the United States, which is my long-winded way of talking about the Ottawa Receiver situation. But it's just
makes perfect sense.
Just funny to me to think back about Peterman being there. Back to the original question. I don't even know if I asked you anything about what happens with the receivers here.
I just want to note for anybody who may be listening, nowhere near as famous as George W. Bush, who clearly does not like to be kowtowed to. Yeah. I enjoy the kowtowing, so bring it on. Bring it on. I'm good with all that. Yeah, Ottawa receiver. Ottawa just needs so much talent that to me, whoever the best player is, and I just think about how much this is all going to be shaken up by Thursday, Friday, Saturday's NFL draft. Mm-hmm. Like if Ben Vladick is a 7th round pick, taking a flyer or a priority free agent, okay, this year, I don't envy you with having to redo your mock 3.0 to change everything up. Arash Madani was on the show Tuesday with us and talked about Pierre-Olivier Lestage, who you have not going 8th to Calgary, as a guy who's going to grab some real attention from down south as well. So there's some real interesting names here. Oh, look who's at 13 to Ottawa. Who this makes a lot of sense. I like this one. I don't know if I've skipped too far ahead. No. Let's make sure to talk about 13 to Ottawa.
Yeah, I was just going to jump up to 13 there because I rambled on about George W. for some reason. And so I wanted to get to this pick, which I talked to Kyle Borsa. If you haven't checked it out, it's here on the CFP podcast feed. Running back, return man extraordinaire from the Regina Rams. And you'll get a full background on his story there. DT caught up with him on the Sports Cage as well today on CKRM out there in Regina. And did he come across to you as interesting, honest, and I don't know what other adjectives to use to describe him. To me, he came off as a really genuine person who has tremendous athleticism, but feels like you could apply him to a lot of systems and he'll get you something. But I came away from watching him and the way he has this wiggle in the hole and his burst after he gets through the line of scrimmage and his vision and all the rest. And I just thought, man, like Lapalisse would use that guy like a toy on the edges. And that was why I gave him second round to Ottawa. Might be too high, but again, like Vladick, when you blow up the combine, virtual combine or not, questionable results or not, depending on what you believe in terms of how valid everything is in a virtual combine system, I still believe that you look at what he does on the football field, regardless of whether it's a 4.47, a 4.63, or a 4.95. I don't give a damn. The dude's fast. Like that's what I always say when I'm at the combine too. Is we're splitting hairs on tenths of a second, and to some people that matters. How many times do you see in a season a guy that clocked in at a 4.63 outruns somebody who clocked in at a 4.65, and then GMs go, "That's why I took him." You never see that direct matchup. So I do think that he's fast, he's athletic, he's interesting, and I imagine that in Ottawa he'd be able to maximize his skill set.
Well, in Ottawa's depth chart at running back is not overwhelmed, right? Timothy Flanders is by default here the number one I would have on their depth chart. That's got 99 career carries, hasn't had one since 2018. We're not shooting the moon here. I always enjoy Brendan Gallanders when he gets into the game. So you put Kyle Borsa. I have Akeem Hunt here, who you may be able to speak better about Akeem Hunt than I could. I just know the name, and he's in red on my chart, so he's Canadian. You add him into that, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, maybe we can do this. Like Gallanders can get a shot, or Borsa can get a shot because we've got cover at that spots, and if we have to carry an American in that spot too, cool. But our needs are so plentiful in Ottawa that maybe we could use that Canadian roster spot a little more efficiently somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or American roster spot.
Here's what I can tell you about Akeem Hunt. I was looking at defensive backs earlier today. Akeem Hunt, I can tell you 2015 Giants, 2015 Ravens practice roster, Texans 15-16, Chiefs 2017, Orlando Apollos 2019, Tennessee Titans 2019, Red Blacks 2020 present. He's bounced all over the place. So I don't think that he's necessarily a huge threat to that.
And he's
stuff.
American.
Yeah. So but
I have him in the wrong color.
That's okay. So to our point though, I mean, Flanders we think they're going to attempt to make him the Andrew Harris guy. And I hate to think that we are pigeonholing roles in this Ottawa offense based off of what we understand with Paul Lapalisse. He could come out with something we completely haven't seen. He's had lots of time to dream something up. I'm sure he's been in a billion coaches clinics. He's a smart guy. He's a creative guy. He is not stricken by what
Flanders.
But he's not stricken by what he's done in the past. Just because he got Nichols in and he got Flanders in and he got maybe Peterman to play the Wolodarski role, and you start to do the pieces on, okay, well, who's Jalen Saunders going to be in? We're doing direct comparison shopping. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up. So I want to get out in front and say that first and foremost, because as much as I like to compare and I like to dream about what that Ottawa offense could look like comparable to the 2019 Grey Cup champion offense, we really don't know until they get it on the field and we have 3 to 6 games of film to be able to know, okay, yeah, he's running the exact same backside screen he did to Lucky Whitehead. Okay, well, who's playing the Lucky Whitehead role and things of that nature. But when I look at their running back room, I mean, yeah, Coombs is going to be involved in that. Sinopoli is going to do his thing, like I said. Saunders is going to be probably your intermediate guy, take some vertical shots, but more intermediate. I think in terms of depth of target, Jalen will probably be a little bit short of RJ Harris. RJ will be your over-the-top guy. You'll have some possession catches for whoever's at the Z spot. And then in running back, if you get it all from Flanders, great. If you don't, he gets dinged. He's not as productive as you thought. Then you start to look around and go, what else is there? And I'm not saying that you're going to have a rookie season for Kyle Borsa in Ottawa if he ends up getting drafted there. That's comparable to what Lewis Ward did as a rookie kicker for Ottawa, where he's the best thing in the entire league and we're all going crazy about it. But what I am saying is, in that system, Paul Lapalisse loves to be able to force you to make decisions on the edges, whether it's a bubble screen with a quick slant in behind, if it's an RPO of some kind, if it's a double read where he's reading through a defensive lineman into a linebacker and then trying to run 2 routes. And like he likes to make people outside of the box think. And then what he does so well is that when you're all thinking about that, he just hands the ball off to Timothy Flanders and they blow you off the ball for 6 yards on first down. So, which is the beauty really of the way that I think the Canadian Football League and 3-down football operates is we play so much of this pass heavy first down stuff. And once in a while, you just sneak a first down run and bang, you get 7-8 yards, which I love. But yeah, I think if Borsa is able to be utilized in that, and I don't want to say that it's like a toy, a candy package is what we kind of like to call it, where you're only giving him jet sweeps. Like, I think he's better than that. But I do think that if you end up seeing him get a couple of screens, a couple of bubbles, a couple of reverses, things of that nature, if you get the ball in his hands, the best way to access somebody's athleticism is to be able to give them a simplified package. And in early days, if Borsa was in Ottawa and they gave him some creative sets, you would see flashes where you would realize, wow, okay, this guy is for real. He can actually make plays. And I don't think that's going to be in between the tackles. And I don't think that's going to be every down. And I don't think that's going to be a lot on first down. I just think on second down as a different style of running back to Flanders, assuming he's the starter, that fits for me. And that's why I put him in that spot.
Well, and in Kyle Borsa, do you have a chance to make what you and I kind of both thought Anthony Coombs would be when he came in? Oh, man, Coombs has been around for a while for a guy who's 28, but a guy who had been a running back at university, but he can split out here. And then, in the open field, he is going to absolutely make you look silly. Can Borsa do that? And in the end, that kid's got to get some carries out of the backfield. He's got to get some of those pop passes. He needs to get him into some open space. And then, you know what? Let's fool around and see what he can do if our interior offensive line feels like going for a push, right?
Yeah.
That athleticism, and I mean, you don't. I just think of this with Kyle Borsa, and I'm with you on everything you've said. If you run a 4.46 and you bench more than anybody, like just a perspective, he weighed in at 193. The bench press test is 225.
Yeah.
He benched more than his body weight 22 times. Everybody else who did that at the combine was either Ben Vladick, who is 240, or over 300 pounds. It's very clear Kyle Borsa is very serious about being in the best shape.
Yeah.
What would he look like at 205? How would he run if he got up to 200 pounds? I feel like he would have a really good idea what that would do to him. Or does it really matter because it's the CFL and guys who are 193 can absolutely succeed in roles. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look up here for comparison's sake some of the heights and weights when they were measured at the CFL Combine to, again, give some perspective on where we're at. So Brendan Gallanders, I'm just looking for here quick because he is the one that's in Ottawa right now. So when Brendan Gallanders was coming out, he was at 203 pounds and he put up 23 on the bench. So he was 5'10", 203, and he put up 23 on the bench, which for Brendan Gallanders on the bench press, that puts him in the 86th percentile in terms of running backs ever tested at the CFL Combine. And then you go to Borsa, and like you say, he's up in that spot where he is measuring in at 193. He's a little bit taller by an inch and a little bit as well over Gallanders, but at 193 and being able to put up the bench total that he did, it puts him in the 81st percentile. But again, it's a crazy number for strength. Strength is not where he's going to make his money. Obviously, it's going to be speed, but at 193, he's in the 98th percentile when it comes to 40-yard dash time. And if I just, I'll sort this based on weight, and I want to see the people around him at 193 where they have kind of levied up in terms of, I mean, people that were similar to his weight. Dylan Campbell when he came out from Laurier, Nathan Riva when he came out from Western in 2012, Alex Christie in 2017 coming out from Manitoba. Bryce Vieira was at an East Regional Combine in 2018. He was right in that area as well. Ryan Granberg from Queens tested extremely well. Combine 2012. I can't believe that was 2012 that Granberg came out. But and Atlee Simon from Regina as well was a little bit lighter actually. Yeah. Actually, no, he was 6 pounds heavier. He was 199 in that spot. So, I mean, he's in the bottom 20 ever in terms of weight. But at the same time, I mean, he's got the power to offset it. And the guys that are in that bottom 20, they just didn't have the same amount of, like, to put this in perspective, one last thing I'll say here, okay, is that he's in the 81st percentile, like I said, on the bench press at the weight that he is at. The guys that are the same or less weight that have ever been measured in the CFL Combine. This includes Andre Dury. This includes Shaq Murray-Lawrence. See if there's any other good names that are in here. Melvin Abankwo is probably a bit of a niche one that people might not know. Marvin Gaynor, a lot of regional combine guys. But the point being, like Dury and Shaq Murray-Lawrence, their bench, Shaq Murray-Lawrence was in the 43rd percentile, and Andre Dury was in the 4th percentile. But he also had 92nd percentile arms because Dury was just like strangely built. So yeah, he was like short and light and had arms that went longer than anybody had ever seen. So, I mean, the point being, he's a unique combination. And if you're a unique combination of size, speed, talent, skill, you're going to go relatively high. And I'm just wondering where the best fit is for him if it's not Ottawa. Because, like I say, any team I think will get to use Kyle Borsa and they'll like him. But I envision him in that spot, which leads us to the larger conversation that we wanted to get to here, which is Canadian running backs. If you want to check out the rest of the mock draft, all the picks are up there on CFL.ca. Go check them out. But you had a really good point, I thought, today, DT, online on your radio show about Canadian running backs, because you just don't see much drop-off between the idea of a Canadian running back and an American running back. And there might be some people who will say, shut up, CJ Gable, USC, started as a freshman, William Stanback, monster. I mean, does this still hold what you are saying against those monster examples, or what is the context for this argument?
Well, William Stanback's an absolute monster. Like that dude, well, it's unfair to say he's a monster because he probably eats monsters, right? Like that guy is unbelievable. But you just look at the range of Americans that we have at running back, and there are elite ones, and then there are ones that are just all the way through. So it's kind of an extension of my argument about how running backs, who the specific running back is, doesn't particularly matter, right? Every running back in Ottawa last year performed pretty poorly. Moses Madu was the guy they started with, performed pretty poorly. When it was Brendan Gallanders, well, okay, if you can't block for me, I can't run, even though I'm Brendan Gallanders. God, Marshall, I cannot remember any names today. This is so mortifying for me. The guy they threw in, who I was really impressed with when Madu failed.
Oh, Crockett.
Thank you, John Crockett.
Yeah.
God, I loved him in fantasy. Why can't I not remember any names today? There are so many examples of why the particular running back doesn't matter. So if you're me and you think, well, running back then becomes a less valuable position than coaches perceive it to be. Because if someone talks to me about 20 carries a game, I'm gonna yell at them because it doesn't happen anymore. While we were doing the show earlier, I looked at 170 starting running back games last year. 13 times the guy had 20 carries. No surprise, most of them were wins. So let's just stop talking about 20 carries a game, because nowadays guys get 12 carries and they catch some passes.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to think, when you think of the Canadian running backs in the CFL, granted they're concentrated with two teams, but Andrew Harris, Johnny Augustine in Winnipeg. Sean Thomas Erlington, for when he was playing, was the best running back in the CFL. Right. And he's working on an offense that was working fantastic. But then there's Jackson Bennett and Malik Irons, and Coombs got to start there in Hamilton. Gallanders got to start in Ottawa. Ante Milanovic Leader got to start in 2019 in Calgary. Wayne Moore got carries in BC. You had 8 Canadians start a game at running back in 2019. 10 of them got significant carries overall. So I wanted to go back in and, okay, it happened. The Milanovic Leader one was Calgary had to fit the ratio one day, and they said, oh, let's just make the flip at running back, because Calgary is a team that does not care who starts at running back. By the way, they've performed the last few years. So I wanted to look at numbers. So this is running backs in the last 5 years. I took the data from 2015 to 2019 and just said, okay, running backs who had significant contributions. I think to get down to guys on the Canadian side like Jackson Bennett, I put the lower limit at 29 carries just because I thought, well, let's get Jackson Bennett in there. Yeah. But then you also get great names like Roy Finch and Akeem Shavers and Paris Cotton. So you get a lot of folks in there. The average running back took 5.3 yards per carry, got 5.3 yards per carry, okay? Average. The average American running back got 5.4 yards per carry. The average Canadian running back, 5.2. So American 5.4, Canadian 5.2. And I go, that's not enough to make me think it absolutely positively has to be an American. Yards after contact, almost identical. Both when you round them down, go to 2.7 yards per carry after contact. Americans, they make guys miss a little more. They get hit in the backfield a little less. Those are all other factors. There's nothing in these stats that would say, you know what, this has to be an American. But yet I feel like so many teams treat it like this has got to be the best American because A, B, C, and D. And if you're me, and we can expand on this more, I would rather have that American position. I think the difference between American and Canadian can be more dramatic at other spots in the field than at running back. And I think we have several examples of how Canadians prosper when you make them your man.
Yeah, and my takeaway from all of this is that we are parsing these numbers of guys who get a chance to start as Canadian running backs, and we rarely see teams invest in Canadian running backs in a meaningful way. They'll take them if they're good on special teams, but they're not going to take an undersized guy and allow him to find his footing or get up to speed, because there's just this belief that when you get to the CFL, you got to be able to hit the ground running if you're going to be at that position. I'm trying to think, the last time I saw somebody that was relatively undersized that got drafted or picked up and got any touches might be like Ryder Stone for Montreal.
Oh yeah, Montreal.
I mean, that's one of the few I can think of off the top of my head of someone that I looked at and I'm like, wow, that's different. And again, what happens is he gets a couple of touches, he looks relatively effective, and he retires 3 years in. Because that's what always happens to the Canadian running backs, is that they go in, they become a backup, they play on specials, they don't get a chance to really truly start. They don't really seem like they get developed all that much, although I'm not sure how much development at large happens regardless of positional group in the CFL at times, because I think a lot of these coaching staffs are focused on winning, and rightfully so, and they don't sit around and think to themselves, well, we got to make sure that Ryder Stone is ready to be our starter if Standback goes down. They'll find other options around that, be it a Shaq Murray and somebody else that I think might have been in Montreal at the time. So, I look at this as, what if the guys we're talking about actually got given a true opportunity, actually got prioritized, and actually they actually decide, you know what, let's build something around this guy. Let's work to his strengths. And, it doesn't necessarily just go back to Kyle Borsa, but Borsa is a good example of, is he going to go into the league, play 3 years, retire because he's never getting a shot and he's tired of his body being beaten up and he needs to move on and make some money for the rest of his life? Or, maybe he's got a girlfriend, fiance, wife, otherwise kid on the way, and he just says, this isn't for me anymore. Or could he go to a team, get an opportunity, be productive, and change the way that we look at these type of things? And Andrew Harris has done a great job of that, of making people realize, oh, Canadians can play running back and be effective. It's not new for Canadians to do that. It's just rare, and it feels rarer than ever, because I think there are certain positions in the CFL, as you say, that we landmarked as the marquee is the American, because there are so many good Americans that play that position that you would have to think, well, there's got to be, a multitude of guys that are American that are better than Canadians. But your numbers disprove that, because when the Americans get those opportunities, it says to you, well, why do I care about where somebody is from if they're producing? And also, if those numbers hold true, then why are we paying $100,000, $200,000, $250,000 to an American running back at a premium price to be our star in a league where we don't run the ball that much, when you can get the same productivity from the Canadian kid that's down the street if the blocking up front is proper and he understands pass protection?
Yeah, I think as CFL fans as a whole, we perceive Andrew Harris as this total outlier. Yeah. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he is the rare Canadian. I'm like, well, Jerome Messam was pretty good.
John Cornish.
He is not that long. Right, John Cornish. John Cornish might have been the outlier of outliers, because 7 yards a carry in multiple seasons. Holy cow. I mean, but then again, how much of that was actually Cornish and how much of that was the rest of the offense? So when I think of, well, is Andrew Harris the outlier? Johnny Augustine ripped up the Rider defense in his 2 starts this past season in 2019 when Harris was suspended. So is Harris an outlier if Johnny Augustine can do much the same thing? I really don't think so. let me throw this to you and think of this from a salary cap perspective and think of this from a talent perspective as well, because everything is about, can we meet the salary cap? Or in this season, can we meet the salary floor? If you were the BC Lions in 2019, you're trying to meet the salary cap, I could offer you Suk Chung at right guard and a Canadian and an American at running back. Or you could put a minimum salary American at guard and put a Canadian at running back.
Yeah.
That second one would be a lot cheaper. You'd save, what were the reports of what Chung was making? North of 200 grand, 65 minimum. So you save 180 grand on him. Canadian running back. If you're like me and you don't believe it matters, what could you do with an extra 180 grand on your salary cap? By just getting their American guard would be plentiful as well, right? And you would save all that money and keep the ratio the same.
I wonder how much pressure there is on a front office to not just stick to the status quo, but if Trevor Harris ends up getting destroyed for Edmonton because, James Wilder Jr. didn't see a blitzer coming from the backside and he misread pass protection, then people are just going to go, Wilder, man, that's so annoying. I mean, he should know, he's a veteran. If it's a Canadian kid who looks out of place that makes the mistake, everybody's going, Sunderland, what the hell is that kid from Laurier doing on the field? And all of a sudden it becomes a question of the front office of, you're putting that out there when you can have a big, how many American running backs there are available that are coming out of the NFL that are disposable parts to that league because there's so many of them and their age and their injury history and all the rest from getting dinged every play. We're putting this on the field in Edmonton while all these other teams are trotting out here with this guy, that guy. And you start to realize the optics on that. That might be part of the pressure that you can't just because the actual reality, the numbers, as you say, will speak to the fact that you get somebody who's talented in there, regardless of the optics, the passport, otherwise, if they can produce for you, if your line's doing a good job, it's no problem. But all of a sudden the presentation of this is, well, but if they don't do a good job, then we have something that we can go and blame because we're doing it different than other teams.
Yeah, and the argument I would make back to somebody who rips on me for having a Canadian running back is the argument I'll make a lot of times. Luke Mulliner, my color partner, will say, you have to be able to pass protect. Well, are Americans inherently better at pass protecting in Canadian football than Canadian kids? As a coach, teach the guy how to pass protect, right? One, he's there to run the football for however much you run the football, which varies greatly in the league. Two, you're not going to put an inept Canadian running back on the field. A guy who has no idea in pass protection is going to hit the bench regardless of what nationality he is. So when people will use that argument against me and I go, you're arguing a coach is going to use a person who gets your quarterback killed? No, stuff happens. It happens. In that case, Trevor Harris, you didn't get obliterated, but in this hypothetical, Trevor gets obliterated because a running back made the mistake. His nationality it is optics you'd have to fight, but we're already getting there. 10 guys had real carries last season. We need to. If my take on running backs, which is, I didn't invent it, but I believe it. If my take on running backs is the one, hey, we're going to have more guys getting touches. And oh my gosh, and it doesn't have to be Chuba Hubbard level guys. It could be guys who we were talking about earlier, guys like Anthony Woodson and Matt Walter and Mercer Timmis and Stephen Lumbala and Anthony Coombs and Nick Dembski and Keenan LaFrance. As I think of all the great Canada West running backs I've seen in my years calling games there. These guys can get more touches and more tackles, and there's no reason why 200-pound Anthony Coombs can't pick up a blitzer like 200-pound John White, for example. There's no reason. Good coaches will weed out the guys who can't do all of the things because that's what they tell us they do. You have to be good at the little things.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. You're right, because it's looked at as like a charity case. If a Canadian kid gets into the game and messes up, why is he out there? And if an American gets in there and doesn't perform as well, we go, just find the next one, find the next American. It's like, maybe just like draft and develop the Canadians, as you're saying. So I think it's a point well made, and I think it's one that hopefully you have opened some people's eyes to when it comes to draft night, because there's not a deep running back class, but it's also an interesting year because of Chuba Hubbard, and we'll see what happens with him in the NFL draft coming up this weekend. And by the time that we get to the CFL draft next Tuesday on May 4th, I do think that we're going to end up having a bit of a clearer picture of where Chuba's going to go, but we won't really know until we understand how teams feel about him. And they talk to their sources in the NFL to find out how likely he is to stick, strength of the roster, injury history, things that we don't necessarily have information privy to. But we will keep you updated on that as we head towards the draft closer and closer, because he's certainly the marquee one. After that, it does get a little bit thin. There's, Glover that is out of Shepherd, I believe, that used to be the West Virginia walk-on, who has been super productive down in D2. And there's a couple of guys that are in the RSEQ that are more fullback types, but after that, it's kind of thin, unfortunately. So we'll see where it goes.
Before we move, Marshall, I just want to hit those numbers one more time.
Yes.
American 2015 to 2019, American running backs 5.36 yards per carry. Canadian running backs 5.24 yards per carry. That is a 2% difference in yards per carry?
Yep.
Come on. All we are saying is give Canadians a chance.
There you go. Let's move on to our main topic on the pod today for you here on the breakdown. DT's excited about this one. I am too. I'm excited to see what you have pulled up here, because I have a feeling that you've gone a little bit more in depth on this one than I have, because you are fired up. We're doing best and worst draft picks of the last 10 years in the Canadian Football League. You've been drooling at the names that you have compiled of some of your worst. I'm not even sure if you have any best that are on your list there on how you've been staring at your computer, just longing for this moment over the last 50 minutes to us to get to this point. But why don't you kick us off here, and you can pick a best or a worst of the last 10 years in the CFL draft through your eyes.
I felt so horrible because as I went
through, you didn't. Don't lie. You don't feel bad about any of this.
I felt bad because I call games in Saskatchewan. I like to think of myself as fairly unbiased, but when you're going through the last 10 years of drafts, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers appear on this list so many times. I felt so bad after a while. Well, why don't we do, what's sexier, the best or the worst? Because
I think they're both interesting. Like, it's for me, because I've been covering this so intensely for the CFL since 2016, 17, somewhere in there. It's funny going back through these draft lists specifically of the last 5 years, but really the last decade, because they were guys that I knew I either played against or played with or was aware of. And I would watch the draft to see if my friends were getting drafted. And then I would see what Dwayne Ford was saying about the guys that actually got drafted. And so this is, every time I open up this file of draft history, it's a weird trip down memory lane for me, because a name will just jog a thought or a memory or a story give me anything you got, because I love all of this.
Okay. Let's go on. I'm going to go on my best list. These are the guys that just missed my top 5.
Okay.
Spencer Moore from 2013.
Nice.
Mike Daly was a 6th round pick in 2013. Goodness gracious. Yeah. And Shaq Johnson, 4th round pick in 2016. All very close to my top 5. I have to go at number 5 in my best draft picks in the last 10 years. 5th round of 2012, the 31st pick by the Calgary Stampeders, a guy you know very well. Mike Filer was a 5th round draft pick almost a decade ago.
Yeah, he didn't stick, obviously, when he was out there in Calgary very long, but ended up finding his way back closer to home because he is a Brantford boy. But I remember talking to Mike in I believe it was his first or second year in Hamilton about his time in Calgary. And he said, I thought I was going to be there forever. Like, I really thought that was going to be my spot. But you have to keep in mind that essentially in and around the same point that he is there, in comes someone named Brett Jones. When Brett Jones comes in and ends up setting the world on fire and winning the Rookie of the Year, and Filer maybe becomes a little bit expendable in that timeline. So, but yeah, that's a pretty good one, man, because he's been sensational for a long time. I got a lot of love for Mike. He's been extremely honest with me over the years I've covered the Ticats, and it was interesting, actually. I was talking to Jeff Cummins, the head coach of Macadia, on the podcast this week, and I was trying to figure out in these mock drafts who to give Hamilton as a center, with Filer probably being on his way out at this point, right? And I'm looking at it thinking, there's no real true center, like a real standout center. And then this kid, Alex Smith from Acadia, tests really well. And I asked Coach Cummins about him, and he said, yeah, I mean, he sees the game. He's a super smart kid. I believe he said he was going into medical school, and he's a fifth-year guy, and he's played center reps for them for years at Acadia, and he makes the calls at the line, and I'm going, AUS center that is decently more athletic than we thought he would be, that's extremely cerebral and has a great build. Sounds a hell of a lot like Mike Filer, and if Filer's on the way out, I'm starting to wonder if the Ticats don't get a value pick at a center and end up in a year or two, maybe even sooner, starting someone like Alex Smith, who's completely off. I mean, first of all, it's a generic name. Second of all, you just think it's the dude that just retired from the NFL that broke his leg gruesomely, because that's all you associate with the name Alex Smith.
Yeah.
But he is so under the radar, and he might be the next Mike Filer. So in 10 years, we could be talking about the same situation, but for him.
How many would that make? I'm trying to think if that would make 3 guys that play center in the Canadian Football League being named Alex. Mateus, Fontana, and Smith.
Yeah, there you go.
I wonder. So Mike Filer is my number 5. Who's 5 on your best list?
So for me, I am going to go for my number 5, Ryan King, 38th overall, Edmonton, 2012. And again, you're saying, like, why is that the best? Because the dude was super consistent and he just retired. But that's why, because he was a position that you have to have. I know it's not sexy. I understand.
Long snapper for the win.
But you have to be able to have that position locked down. And as we just saw in Hamilton with Aaron Crawford, who just left for agency to go back home because he's a Medicine Hat, Alberta native, and he went to go play with the Stampeders. If you can get somebody and they can be in that spot and you don't even have to think about them for close to a decade, that's just a win as an organization. And Ryan King gave them, on top of all the great community work and everything that he did in Edmonton and surrounding areas, he held down that job, rarely made a mistake, barely ever said his name, game in, game out. So I applaud him, and I think that was a great pick. And I was trying to stick in my best to guys that were drafted by the team, stayed with the team, and had success with the team. And that was part of my methodology, was that Ryan King, drafted by Edmonton 2012, stayed there and was a value pick, and just did his job about as well as you can do it for close to a decade. So congrats to him for making the list.
I like it. Not on my list. I like it nonetheless. I just noticed I have 4 Calgary picks in my best 5. I had no idea. Number 4 for me from 2017, Tunde Adeleke was a 3rd-round pick of the Stampeders.
Yeah.
Oh, I play safety. Oh, you need me to play Sam? Cool, I'll do that. Calgary lets him go. Hamilton's happy to pick him up. Tunde Adeleke in the 3rd round.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Tremendous pick. That's a real good pickup right there.
No doubt. I'm also going to give you a Calgary one here. This is from 2014. Again, it's funny. It's funny looking at the roster here. You might have the same, but Wiggin?
Not on my list.
Okay, Derek Wiggin is what I went with. Derek Wiggin was selected by Calgary out of Queens, 34th overall, 34th, and he's still on the roster, still doing his thing, still being disruptive. I was actually going through some old YouTube clips the other day, and there was some profile that I think Sportsnet did on me when I was in my 5th year, and they used footage of me playing against Queens. And it's so funny because, again, when I say these names jog memories and quick little stories, we were playing against Queens, and I threw like 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and it got close to the all-time OUA record for attempts in a game because we were just chucking it. I think I threw the ball like 60 times. And in that game, there was one play that they played in like super slow-mo, the super HD 8K camera or whatever. And it was of me just chucking and ducking because Wiggin was flying in on me. He's just a mountain of a man. He hit hard. But I also, my friend, one of my best friends from high school, Trent Winton, his roommate in first year was Andrew Liu, who of course went to the CFL, and was Derek Wiggin. So when I went home in my first year of university, of course you go home, hang out with your friends from high school, go to have drinks. I go to Queens Res. I walk into the room. It's Andrew Liu and Derek Wiggin. So I end up going out and having drinks with them in downtown Kingston, Stages, Grizzly Grill, whatever, like Ale House. And we go to all these places, have a great time. We become friends. And then there we are in our 5th year. And on this one play that this was in the Sportsnet profile, Chuck, duck, get blasted. But they used the long version of the clip. And the clip ends with Derek Wiggin. As he hits me, we both roll over. I land up on my backside. I lean up to see where the ball went. It was a catch by Danny Vandervoort, and Wiggin turns to me, and I remember distinctly him just going, "Yo, you good?" Like he was checking in on me because he was a nice guy and he was a friend. But for somebody who was drafted 34th overall that long ago to be that nice, but also that violent and that consistent, he's just a funny dude, man. I love Derek Wiggin. He's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. So he makes my list as well there at 34th from 2014.
That is very good. I will go for my number 3 pick in 2013. This man just retired, and I profess my love for him on this and many other venues. In the 6th round, the Calgary Stampeders selected Shane Bergman.
Oh, nice.
And he was just a monster at left guard for a lot of years, and I'm kind of sad that he's gone, and now Calgary has to figure out what they're going to do without him. But 47 players taken before Shane Bergman. Yeah. I'd have to dig back into the 2013 draft, but I feel like, I don't know, 45 of them, I would rather have Shane Bergman.
Yeah.
With how it played out. We're Captain Hindsighting here, but that is a tremendous pick.
I was very tempted at this point to take a quarterback as a great draft pick in CFL history. If I look at 2015, 62nd overall, Calgary selects Andrew Buckley. Okay, so that's 62nd overall. That is the last pick of the official draft, because after that was Garrett Wagner and Brandon Tett out of Oregon and Dartmouth, respectively, who were supplementary draft selections. In 2015, I also could have gone, depending on what you think of his playing career, as it is now wrapped up as well, 31st overall, Brandon Bridge was drafted out of South Alabama to Montreal. Now, I'm not saying that was a great draft pick that blew anybody away, but what I'm saying is, I mean, that guy danced with Montreal several times over, so the fact that he got drafted by them, I find intriguing that he still ended up being in and around that a couple of different times. But I digress, because I am going to go with somebody from this draft in 2015. And again, this might not be a marquee name, but if you watch CFL games closely, you know his value. Adam Konar was drafted.
Oh, okay.
He was 25th overall, linebacker out of Calgary to Edmonton, 25th overall in 2015. And he's, again, it's not a super high bar here. I'm just looking at a depth pick that's after the 2nd, 3rd round that ended up having great effect with their team and probably outplayed what people expected from them. Adam Konar, to me, fits that mold.
No love for Keenan LaFrance in the 6th round of the 2015 draft. Remember the Ottawa playoff game? Come on.
I do. I was there. Yeah, I was actually. That was a weird assignment, that game. I was tasked by CFL.ca to do a Snapchat story. So they put me on the sidelines and they said, "Hey, just take some snaps." And so I just wandered around, and I think I put it up on my YouTube page or something afterwards too. And it's basically just me wandering in the snow, taking videos of people spray painting sidelines to make sure that we can get the game started after halftime.
Did you get any boomerangs in there? Did you put them on your MySpace page?
Pre-boomerang, pre-TikTok. I mean, Snap was king. It's amazing how these things change so quickly. I mean, that was 3-4 years ago, and now you say to somebody, "Hey, you want to do a Snapchat story?" And they're like, "Oh, what?" So it's certainly changed a little bit. What do you got up for us here? Where are we at? Number 2 for you?
We're number 2. Okay, my number 2 and my number 1. I am 100% convinced these are number 2 and number 1, because to me there's a significant difference gap between 2 and 3. I'm not sure I got this correct, but at number 2, and I can explain my thinking as we go.
Yep.
At number 2 from 2011, 4th round, quarterback turned 100 catch man, Brad Sinopoli.
Oh yeah.
He might be the best one. I love the guy who I have at number 1, but Brad Sinopoli in the 4th round that cat's going to the Hall of Fame, and he's just nonstop catches and nonstop production. And to me, he's your number 3 option, but he's your number 3 option 120 times a year, which is a fantastic number in production. And if he's surrounded with Ellingson, Deontay Spencer, Brad Sinopoli is going to have an impact, and he is going to make you pay. I love that. I don't know. I might have to put him back number 1, but right now I have him at number 2.
He's just the best too, right? Like it's funny. There's a lot of guys on this list who you're like, they're just quality, great people to be around. Like I mentioned about Wiggin, Sinopoli, certainly that, and a couple of others. And I'm thinking, I don't know if that plays into their ability to stick in the league longer term or what, but to have success and to be around and to be wanted back by your team, I would certainly think that has an impact. I am going to go a little bit brash on my number 2 here, which is going to be 2019 CFL draft. Okay, so this person has only played in 1 year of the Canadian Football League, and I am going to give them a top 5 depth pick, Mr. Irrelevant, 2019, Colton Hunchak, receiver out of York, going to the Calgary Stampeders.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
What?
He was,
okay.
If you look at what they did, and I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but Calgary's rookie receiving class with Huri Mayala and Colton Hunchak in 2019, they had like 80%, I believe it was, of rookie receiving yards. Colton Hunchak is a pretty good player that has found a nice role in that Calgary offense. He's already got the trust of Bo Levi Mitchell, which we saw from his rookie year, which is rare to do as a rookie, especially a U Sports rookie. And with him and Hergy and Richardson Zanny, they built, I think, a really solid national group there of receivers. And Colton has the ability, he's only played 1 year, right? So if you look at anybody after their first year, very, very rarely do you say that guy had a good impact on their team. And I could see a nice little bright future for him. It's very similar to Jimmy Ralph for me. Like Jimmy Ralph was that guy where he went to Toronto. Very quickly, he was productive. And very quickly, you said they're better off for having him. Colton Hunchak is that to me with Calgary. And I think he ends up sticking there. And I think he ends up having a solid 8 to 10 year career. And I'm not sure if he becomes Sinopoli. He doesn't necessarily have the same longevity or length literally, but I do think that he's a really nice player that I'm cheering for him because I like the way that he plays the game, and he was really good for them in 2019. So if I had to project one that'll be in this top 5 moving forward, I would say he's there.
Just for comparison's sake,
yeah.
Your number 2 has 16 catches for 231 yards.
So good.
My number 2 has 509 catches for 5,741 yards.
Hey, but let's do Brad Sinopoli's first year in the CFL and how many catches he had.
He played 18. According to this, the first year he caught a pass, he caught 34 of them for 417.
In his first year?
The first year in which he caught a pass, he had 2 years. 11 and 12 according to CFL.ca.
He
played 28 games in total and had 0 stats.
Yeah.
So I don't know what was there. I like it. I like that you're that you're taking recent guy.
I could have gone with Chris Judge, 71st overall to the Riders out of Cal Poly. I could have gone with that as my second best pick in the history of.
That was a good dude.
Yeah.
That was honestly as I don't want to speak for all the media, but we were all kind of sad when Chris tore up his knee in training camp because he was a super interesting guy to talk to. I enjoyed Chris. I don't know what his future is now, but he was a lot of fun to talk to.
That was amazing. When I saw that name come across, I'm like, wait, did they just take Judge? And then I realized, and then you start to hear the backstory and how many times he'd been off from football and the injuries he'd gone through. You're like, oh my God, this guy is going to turn into a Disney movie if he actually ends up being able to get through. And then obviously gets dinged in training camp. And it was a depth pick. It was a shot in the dark and it didn't work out. But
well, it's funny because we went to Jeremy O'Day after that draft. I had just gotten to Regina not long before the draft. And we're like, Jeremy, is that Cam Judge's older brother, Cam Judge, who is in his now 3rd year with your team? Is it his older brother that you drafted? It's like, yep, that's who it is. Okay. All right. We're learning something every day. We have not had a single one crossover. I'm going to judge you if you don't have the same number 1 as me. I'm going to judge you because my number 1, someone said the phrase ratio breaker today, and I just cringed because I'm not a big fan of how overused that term is.
Yeah.
It is appropriately used for the 41st pick of the 2017 draft. In the 5th round, the Edmonton football team selected Kwaku Boateng.
Yeah.
He plays defensive end. He legit starts at defensive end. He makes an impact off that defensive end as a Canadian, and you got him in the 5th round. I would give you the 1st overall pick for that. To me, that is the best pick in the draft in the last 10 years.
I see your 2017 draft pick, and you believe that there is excellent depth there and somebody who is changing the ratio and being productive, and he is 41st overall. And I raise you my 2017 CFL draft pick, the best depth pick I have seen in my time covering the draft, 66th overall, Sean Thomas Erland. Again, I say this knowing he has not been healthy enough to be able to stay productive, lock down that spot. And when you think running back in Hamilton, you don't think Sean Thomas Erland. But you watch early season football before he gets dinged. My God, you think Sean Thomas Erlington. And that's why I believe that for 66th overall, I mean, both of those guys, their university careers at the University of Montreal and Wilfrid Laurier were standout. And Kwaku, I don't remember what Sean did at the combine. I have the numbers here, but I mean, Kwaku's broad jump, I remember standing there watching him do it live and watching the entirety of the scouting community turn to each other and go, "Ooh, okay, all right, yeah, we get it." And everybody was kind of woken up from their slumber, I think, on that morning by seeing what he was able to accomplish. So, yeah, I mean, I have great respect for what he's done. I feel bad about his injury history. 2019, going into Montreal week 4, he's one of the hottest players in the entire CFL. 2018. Through the first half of the year, he's one of the hottest players in the CFL. And that's easy to forget because the lasting memories we have from CFL seasons are who was the MOP, who won the Grey Cup, memorable playoff moments. He hasn't been involved in any of those. If he stays healthy, then he absolutely has those. The Ticats probably don't end up dealing for Tyrell Sutton. They probably don't give touches to Cameron Marshall. They had plans. Again, sure. June Jones' story on this one too. I remember talking to June after 2017. And saying to him, "Hey, I'll send you, something I put together on kind of productivity and usage." And I said, because Sean Thomas Erlington is by himself when I put this together. Like, he's not getting enough touches and he's got crazy production. And June said, I know. He always had this way of leaning in, right? He goes, "I know. I saw it too." He's like, "I think he can do everything. I think he can be our lead back. And I don't care if he's Canadian." He said, "I think he can be our lead running back." And I've always felt that way about Sean. Unfortunate that he doesn't really have that longevity right now of health to be able to show it off. And the other one that I'll mention in here that's not a depth pick, but certainly when you're drafted by a team and you have the success that he did, I chose this just because I love the work that you do, DT, with special teams. Rob Maver, 5th overall to Calgary in 2010. That kind of takes some balls to draft somebody who is a specialist not in a global draft, up in the 5th overall spot. Calgary did it. Yeah. It paid off. Like, he was money for them for a long time. He was meaningful to field position in Calgary at McMahon for close to a decade until he retired.
Yeah, and they made him punt in plus territory so many times. That's such a Dickinson thing to do.
Yeah.
And Maver, I mean, you see Maver, how he improved at it throughout his career to the point where they went, "Okay, let's do this." I don't know if I totally understand why they kept forcing him to do that. And he and I had a wager that he would lead the league in net punting. I think it was 18. And I thought, if you're punting from there 43 a lot, that's going to be kind of hard to do. And yeah, I think he just got pipped that year. I forget who would have got him, but 5th overall punter is, you wouldn't see that in a lot of leagues, but in the Canadian Football League, if you can have a guy for a decade and you think he's that good, it can make a lot of sense because, man, there are a lot of first-round picks that turned out to be nothing as we looked at our worst list. Oh, yes. My goodness.
Let me know what you got here with your 5th.
Okay, so as I went across these, I ran across some guys that I'm like, did Marshall play with this guy? I'm going to feel bad if I pick a guy that Marshall played with, or that Hamilton has the worst one ever in my mind. In 2012, I was doing some sports in Winnipeg. I just started doing a morning show in Winnipeg. So we looked at sports, and they had the 3rd pick in the draft. And who are they going to take? How about an offensive lineman? And then the name Tyson Pencer gets called out. And we go, that's not the one that we were thinking. He was a guy who had a reputation. Oh, he is mean on the field. He is nasty. He is exactly what you want in a lineman. Yeah. And as you take it out, you're like, oh, so what you want is a guy who won't really make the team very strong and is gone from the entire league in 3 years for various reasons. Tyson Pencer, number 5 on my pick of worst draft picks in the last 10 years.
Okay. I am going to go here with, what do I got for you? I got a couple of different ones I can go. And, I don't feel bad doing this to guys that I played with, against, covered otherwise, but like Bo Landry was a player, right? In his time in the CFL. I knew Bo from his first recruiting trip to Laurier. We were on it together when I still hadn't committed anywhere, neither had he. And he ended up going to Western and having a great career, but he gets taken 8th overall, and he had all the accolades to be worthy of being that top draft pick. But I don't know if that was, going back to what we were talking about, running backs, where you don't really get a true opportunity, because he played a position where in 2014 in Hamilton, you're basically logjam behind any given number of American middle linebacker starters and Simone at will. So you're just going to be a specialist for an extended period of time. And he did, and he was productive in some seasons. But Bo, for me, I mean, when I look top 10, which is really what I'm looking at here, top 10 is in that draft, it's like Pierre Lavertu, Matthias Gosen, Anthony Coombs, you can make the argument, but Antoine Pruneau been pretty good in Ottawa. David Foucault bounced around NFL, came back to CFL. Devin Bailey, little hit and miss depending on what you think. Quinn Smith, a little bit the same. But to me, in that top round, Bo Landry probably in 2014 is the weakest in the big picture of that. Despite the fact that I love the guy, I just feel like the accomplishments and accolades and everything else, they probably don't stack up. Yeah,
that draft was interesting because I had considered, and I have an autographed Evan Gill Hamilton Ticats jersey because that's such a good dude, and I watched his games at Manitoba, but tore up his knee, right? He came back to university. Injuries. Exactly, right, and could never get on the field and got 6-gamed, and then it seems like 6-game is a nasty cycle that you can never get off. He ended up in Edmonton, and then just his career never had any chance to take off, and was done within 4 CFL seasons. And you go, that little run, right? You mentioned the top 4 in that draft, but I mean, Devin Bailey, Quinn Smith, Bo Landry, Evan Gill into the second round, and get some names I don't know. And you go, there was a real rough stretch in that 2014 draft where nobody's pick, turned out the way they thought it would. So Bo Landry, hey, all right. Bo Landry. All right, number 4 on my worst pick. I wish I knew why it didn't work out, and give me any insight you can. In 2017, in the first round with the 3rd overall pick, the BC Lions select Danny Vandervoort. And never made any impact whatsoever in BC. I remember waiting, going, I can't wait to see this happen. You're taking him 3rd overall. This must be great. And just no, and then moved on. What was it? Edmonton, and just nothing. What is it? 3 years and just nothing from Danny Vandervoort whatsoever. When, I mean, I was strictly going on draft chatter at the time, just expecting, is this the next big Canadian, and just nothing. At all. He made me look a hell of a lot better than I was when we were in university together. But I talked to a member of the media out in Vancouver when he was struggling, when he wasn't getting on the field. I said, "What's going on with Danny?" And they said, "He's not picking it up. They can't put him on the field. Like he's the system stuff is not clicking right now." And I kind of thought, well, damn. I mean, we were guilty, I think, at Mac of saying, "Hey, Danny, you're more athletic than everyone. Go deep." And then it was like, we'll throw it up to you, or run a corner, or run a skinny post, and so we gave him a lot of vertical stuff. We didn't run a lot of intricate route combos. He didn't use his waggle real creatively. So going into a CFL training camp, I wonder if that might have weakened him, unfortunately, in that spot. But I'm going to go with my next one here from 2017 as well. A couple of picks after Danny Vandervoort. I remember covering this draft. It's one of the first drafts I covered. We were live at a Ticats draft party, and it came up on the screen. Randy Calling from Gannon goes to Calgary, 6th overall. And you look at who came after Randy Calling: Junior Luke out of Montreal, Jeff Gray out of Manitoba, Evan Johnson out of Saskatchewan, even Mason Woods out of Idaho, Darius Vladick was right there, Fabian Foote, Braden Schramm, John Simon Waugh. I mean, I'm going through this list, and I've just listed off 5, 6, 7 guys that are not only still in the CFL, they're still having an impact in the CFL. Yeah. Randy Calling 6th overall for Calgary. For all the praise we gave Calgary for some of the best draft picks, that was a big miss to me. I like when you go through these lists and you're looking at Wikipedia is such a great resource and quick to get to all these things. When you see guys that don't have Wikipedia pages, you just go, oh, something. It did not turn out. Randy Calling played 2 games in 2017, and I think he was delayed getting on the field as well because his knee brace didn't show up in time. Like, he needed a custom knee brace, and he wasn't on the field for the start of training camp because he didn't have it on location in Calgary. I'm like, so you knew you needed the knee brace. I'm just going off the cuff here because I think I remember the story. You need a knee brace, and you didn't have the knee brace. You didn't get there in time. That's a really good way to piss off John Hufnagel really early in your CFL career. Like, just why isn't my 6th overall draft pick? He doesn't have his knee brace. Did he lose it? No, he didn't come with it. Okay. Go on. Like, am I missing something? He needs to be out there. He's our 6th overall draft pick. But
So he's one of the more memorable ones for me, no doubt.
Was he 26 years old? I'm seeing in this story. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he was an overage guy for sure. I didn't know it was that old, but yeah, he was significantly older. I mean, you're talking about Danny Vandervoort coming in, being the CIS Rookie of the Year in 2013. So by the time that Danny's coming out, he's like 22. And you got Randy Colling going 3 picks after him as a defensive lineman. Again, out of Gannon. Yeah. Like, I don't know what Calgary was doing, what they thought they knew that nobody else did, but that was a weird one.
Yeah, I would agree on that one. That's a good pick. Number 3 for the worst draft picks in the last decade. We mentioned his brother a little earlier. Faith Akakady was the number 1 overall pick of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And it seemed like at the time the chatter was, oh yeah, this is a pick that makes sense. Plays 14 games, gets 5 tackles, and is cut by the team before the next season.
Yeah. Guys,
like rookies signed 3-year contracts. And they took the number 1 overall pick after 1 season and said, get out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know anything of the story behind it, but to cut the number 1 overall pick after 1 year, you can't think of that from an organizational perspective as anything but an incredible waste.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I feel like I'm picking on Hamilton with mine, but my third worst here is 15th overall back in 2013. And this is not because he was a bad player or because he got cut after a single year, but 15th overall, you're saying, well, what's the criticism? Maybe they're just taking a shot here. 15th overall, the first 2 rounds to me are still extremely impactful. I actually like the second round of the CFL draft better because I think the first round gets overthought. Randy Colling, Faith Akakady. But I like the second round because second round is typically when you end up getting, for example, this year, the Kyle Borsas or maybe the Nelson Lacombos or the players that you actually know are good, that you actually know will be able to help your team, typically fall into the second. At this spot, 15th overall in 2013, Hamilton took Brent Urban. They ain't seen him, right? Like that probably could have waited. And I understand that you can't fault a team for taking the shot and trying to get somebody into their system, feeling that again, the same thing I said about Ben Vladick, where it's like the BC Lions can't have him turn into a star linebacker in the CFL for anybody who's not wearing orange. So maybe Hamilton was looking at this and saying, if Brent Urban's going to be a stud, he's got to be a stud in Hamilton. Let's spend this value of a pick on him. But I think that, based on the risk, you probably could have gone ahead and gotten somebody different for him. And the names that came after him in that spot, 15th was Brent Urban, 16 was Brett Jones.
Yep.
Right? And like Jermaine Gabriel was 17th overall. Connor Williams was a great linebacker that's an Ottawa native that was out of Utah State. Bo Lacumbo is at 21. Natea J was at 22. Anybody else of interest here? Charlie Power at 28.
Jordan Hoos, Michael Clausen.
Again, it's Matt Vonk had a good career. Yeah, you already mentioned Spence. So that's it's
Shane Bergman.
Mike Daly was in there at 45. I mean, this is down far into the draft list now, but at 15, I felt like they probably could have waited on that one. So for me, that was a bit of a stretch, the same way as I felt about Randy Colling, where it's like, Colling, you took him, you thought you could get him, you got him, but you didn't really ever get anything out of him. Urban, you stretched for him, you got him. You still got the same result. You never got anything from them.
And that's why that pick right there is an example of why I don't want to be a GM in the Canadian Football League. Yeah. You have to you're clearly talking to these guys and trying to pick their brains. What are you thinking about the NFL? What are his chances in the NFL? Doop-a-doop-a-doop. And to try to balance that and go, he was a second round pick in the CFL. And then the next year, a 4th round pick in the NFL. And we've never seen him in Canada. To try to balance that and hope that guys are telling you the truth about their intentions. And not to suggest that Brent did anything, but just to try to decipher who's going to the States and who is the States going to be interested in adds a whole other layer to pain in the acidness when it comes to the CFL draft versus any other draft. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. 2013 was an incredible year. My second worst pick comes from what might be the worst draft of all time for a single team. At number 2, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are on the clock. Eastern Michigan defensive end Andy Malumba is on the board still. And I may have this wrong, but I believe at the time we knew that the Green Bay Packers were interested and he was going to go down there. They take him at number 2 nonetheless. And Malumba goes down to Green Bay, does his thing there over a couple of years, bounces around the NFL, and never comes back to the CFL. On its face, that's terrible. The number 2 pick, you never got to play for you. But in order to make it the worst draft of all time, Marshall, you have to get nothing from everybody else.
Oh.
At number 11 that year, the second pick of the second round, the Bombers select Chris Robertson, who a few days later, we get an email. Chris suffered a terrible knee injury. I think it was like playing pickup basketball or something, and he's out for the year. Chris Robertson never played for them. In the third round, they take Carl Fitzgerald, who played 33 games in his career and had 3 receptions. They then take Michael DeCroce, which I don't know who he is. He never played. They then pick Stephen Ali, 46th overall, never signed a contract. 54th, they took UBC kicker Billy Pavlopoulos, never played for the Bombers.
I think Billy popped for a positive drug test, if I'm not mistaken, when he was at UBC as well before he got drafted there. So crazy career for Billy.
Yeah, but he was a heck of a putter back in college. But in the entire draft, 6 picks, they got 3 receptions. Those are the stats they got from those 6 players. And Andy Malumba headlines what I would contend is the worst draft class ever, the 2013 Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Oh, it's a shame. I played golf. I played golf with Mike DeCroce on my birthday last year, by the way. He was nice. He was a Mac guy, lived down the street. He ended up, I think, breaking his foot in training camp of that year with Winnipeg, got sent home, came to Mac, played out his 5th year, got picked up by Calgary, if I'm not mistaken, went there and had another injury. So he couldn't stay healthy when he got into those training camps. And but he's, I mean, he was, if you look back, 2011 Vanier Cup, in that run for McMaster, he was as explosive as anybody I've been around. Just speed, like just pure. There's also a video of him dunking over somebody in grade 10 at a local Hamilton high school. So he was freaky athletic. He actually went to St. Mary's to start his career, didn't like it out there, decided to come back to Hamilton, was working at like the Fortino's grocery store. Our receivers coach saw him and was like, I thought you were at St. Mary's. He was like, no, I'm actually back in Hamilton. He's like, do you want to come to McMaster? Because we would love to have you if you are interested. He came over and ended up winning the Vanier Cup with Mac. But my second worst draft pick ever in the CFL draft, the second overall pick from 2017, Trey Rutherford. I mean, what a bust, this guy. I mean, just can't believe. He retires. They don't get enough out of him. A second overall pick. This is all just me foreshadowing, trying to steal the wind away from DT's worst ever selection.
Yeah. I considered Trey Rutherford because it didn't. I mean, they got 18 starts out of him last year. He looked like he's really good. Pandemic hits. It's tough to blame them for that one.
That was a full setup just for me to try and say that's the worst ever, man. I can't believe this Trey Rutherford guy. Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, 2018 at number 1 overall, Marshall Ferguson. Please tell me what Hamilton thought they were going to get out of Mark Chapman.
Stud.
Number 1 overall.
They were going to get the future. It was going to be, I don't know if that was going to be like a taser replacement there with Fantus, or if they were going to feature him in some other way. I remember hearing about the trade like everybody else from a Dwayne Ford tweet, which is the rarest of sentences in CFL circles. And you see it and you think to yourself, okay, I remember getting a call from the CFL and their content staff saying, you need to go ahead and redraft your entire draft because we've got a shake up at the top that's going to make everything else change. So I did on short notice, which was a bit of an adventure. I remember the draft happening and everybody going, hey, we got a great player, and then finding out, oh, not great. And I also remember him showing up to a Ticats game. I don't remember which game it was, and being on the sidelines. And it was, I mean, you want to talk about red carpet treatment? It was Scott Mitchell, Matt Affinick, Bob Young. It was them walking him around alongside Sean Burke, Drew Allen. I mean, there was a pack of suited and booted black and gold brass that were surrounding Mark Chapman and family and taking them through Tim Hortons Field down to field level and showing him the fans in the concourse, and fans are waving at him. And that was the way they tried to convince him to come. And he just didn't want it. He just didn't want it. Like, it just never, ever came to fruition.
He signed a deal with the Denver Broncos, never made the team. He went to the AAF and played went to Salt Lake. And then
never reported for them, I don't think either, though.
Oh, really? Yeah. The last thing we heard was no interest in playing football.
Yeah.
And you think of that, and as much as we will rip on guys for the 2013 Bombers draft was atrocious, bad luck with injuries. You really can't. I don't know what you could do about that one. Hamilton must have done their research on Mark Chapman take him with the first overall pick. They must have talked to him. They must have thought, this guy, okay, he wants to try the NFL, but he is going to come back and he is going to slay this league for us. So I don't know what happened in the communication between the two sides, but the first overall pick in the draft never plays a single down for you. The only thing that could be worse is the first overall pick comes and actively, chop blocks your offensive line and lets the other team have the ball and score touchdowns against you.
Yeah, because, like if your left tackle is your first overall pick and he chop blocks and tears your left tackle first overall pick's ACL, then we'd have something that's approximate.
I can't even imagine how, if this wasn't the CFL we're talking about, if this was the NFL, you set your franchise back 5 years by doing stuff like that, right? And the names behind him, Rutherford, if not pandemics, would still be crushing. Peter Godber may get some things in BC. Cordy, nice. Shepley, Sirocco, Ryan Seaver, you think they would like one of those 10-year offensive linemen that came behind him in the draft instead of zero, literally zero from Mark Chapman. That one, I don't know what else even comes close to, well, others come close, but I don't even know what else could be the true contender for worst draft pick in the last 10 years.
What's interesting about it too, GT, is that they obviously missed out on Chapman in 2018. 2019, they come back and they have 3 picks in the top 11, Hamilton does. At 2 overall, they go Jesse Gibbon, local Hamilton guy, Waterloo Warrior. They pick him up. And at number 10, they get Nikola Kalinic, which is sensational that Nikola was a top 10 pick. And at 11, they went David Unger out of Idaho. And to me, David Unger was the replacement for Mark Chapman. Because if they end up having Mark Chapman at that point, I don't think they go Unger. But that was the same, a little bit smaller, fast, twitchy, really, really solid hands. It's funny to think how history changes, because if the Ticats don't take Unger there, then who do they end up going with? Because after Unger was taken in that draft, it was Kyle Saxelid, the offensive tackle out of UNLV, that went to Edmonton. Keon Julian Grant, another receiver, Brady Oliveira to the Bombers, Braden Lennius to the Riders, Nate Anderson, DN, Vincent Desjardins to Calgary, who's a stud. Anybody else? Michael O'Connor was 20th overall. Again, you start to do kind of the spider web here of what could have changed if Chapman came. The ripple effect on the draft, not just that year, but other years, it would have been different, no doubt, because it did change Hamilton's approach there. And all of this could just be, smoke being thrown up in the air that blows away in the wind, where maybe they would have drafted Unger and just used them as depth guys, and boom, you've got your 2 receivers for the next 5 years. But I feel like Chapman was a sure enough bet if he came up. It's a shame they didn't get to see him. I'll never forget seeing those people down on the field pregame. Not that they're not ever on the field pregame in Hamilton, but they were all down there. And they were all singularly focused on Mark Chapman. I was like, man, they are throwing the kitchen sink at him right now to try and get him to come. And he looked like he was having a great time. It's just, there's something there that hasn't been reported, that I don't know if it's the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year anniversary. Somebody, maybe me, is going to ask Mark Chapman, can we talk about this? And can we really, really dig in on what happened here? Because this is one of those stories in CFL history that it's not going away anytime soon, regardless of what you think of the CFL draft and its importance to teams. As you say, that's a major decision that they trade up and go and get that guy, and then to have nothing come out of it, that's going to last as I would say a landmark on Ticats draft history, regardless of how well they draft for the next 10 years. People are still going to go, well, little nerd, this year they're drafting first overall. There's somebody in Hamilton making the joke, I hope it's not another Chapman. And it's like, well, now that's a thing. That's a verb all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I mean, just compared to other guys that didn't quite make the cut for me, 2016, the Riders take Josiah St. John 1-1. You go, at least he played. I mean, he hasn't been good. At least he played. Edmonton takes Scott Mitchell second overall in 2011. Winnipeg, welcome back, Winnipeg, spends the number 2 pick in 2016 to get Garrett Wagner, who made 21 special teams tackles after they took him in the supplemental draft. Or 2011, Winnipeg takes Jade Etienne 4th overall. You go, oh, yeah, there's some ones. But whatever Jade Etienne was in the Canadian Football League, he was something. It may not have been amazing, but he was something. And I just wonder, I can't wait to hear the Canadian Football Perspective podcast on a Monday where you get Mark Chapman to sit down and go, okay, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And if it's you didn't love football, you just happened to be good at it, I get it. As a guy who was never even close to good at football, I kind of don't get it, but I understand not everybody loves football. But that one, it will always just be very strange until we get the 4-part serial podcast by Marshall Ferguson.
It'll be interesting to see what the answer is when we do get that answer, because everybody said, just didn't want to play football and all the rest. Okay, but why wasn't that just made public? Like, if I were the Ticats personally in that spot, I might have just released a statement that said, we went into this with good faith. We thought we had an understanding. It's obvious that our understanding was not true. He's not coming. He's not going to be here, and we're out. This is a part of our history, but now it's in our past. That never happened. It was just kind of quietly like, damn, that one stings. Well, let's hope nobody talks about it and then just move on,
And it's not like when Darian Durant signed with Winnipeg, got whatever it was, $70,000 and retired. If Chapman never signed, he didn't take any money off the Ticats. He didn't rob them of anything.
Yeah.
Right? It's not an evil, it doesn't, from what I know, it doesn't seem like an evil act. It's just very unusual that a team would dedicate 1-1 to a guy who never played and maybe didn't want to play. Yeah. There's some real intrigue behind the scenes there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to make Chris Bauman my worst pick ever just because I want to go with another Ticats receiver. So I'm going to go beyond 10 years just for fun, just to throw that one out there. A little spice in the fire at the end. Back-to-back Ticats receivers going first overall. Don't think we're going to get a Ticats receiver getting drafted first overall this year, but we shall see where we end up. Coming up, it will be Tuesday, May 4th, the CFL draft. We're going to do something for it, extravaganza, live stream. I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go. We'll let you know. Make sure you're following on Twitter and Instagram.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Twitter and Instagram is where you can find us to find out the details on all that good stuff at CF Perspective. As always, we thank our good friends Fox 40, helping you return to play safely with their latest innovations, the Fox 40 Tri-Layer Whistle Mask, and of course the Fox 40 electronic whistle for 15% off all your whistle needs. Visit fox40shop.com and enter the promo code CFP15. What do you got coming up on the cage the rest of the week here, DT?
Oh, we got to get into the NFL draft first. The thing that's going to shake up Marshall Ferguson's mock 3.0, the NFL draft. I promise you this. If Mac Jones is the 3rd overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft, if the San Francisco 49ers traded 3 picks to get up to number 3 and take Mac bleeping Jones, I'm smashing something real hard. And not just because I got money on Justin Fields. I'm happy to take the price they're offered on Justin Fields. But if a forward-thinking organization traded 3 picks to get a guy they probably could have gotten at 12 anyway, no matter who keeps Rappaport, Schefter, I can't believe it's Mac Jones. Until I hear it Thursday night, I will not believe Mac Jones goes number 3 to the Niners. No chance I buy it. That
sounds like the tagline for an offshoot brand of I can't believe it's not butter, is I can't believe it's Mac Jones.
Exactly. A KD knockoff. I like it. Yeah, exactly.
I will be watching the draft and looking forward to finding out where Justin Fields go. I saw that Chris Sims has him mocked 32nd overall to Tampa Bay.
Pure troll.
I saw it. No, it is actually legitimately interesting though. Just a little side offshoot here as we wrap up. I saw a graphic of every mock draft that's been done, whether it's a fan mock draft, a professional media mock draft, an official team website mock draft. And Justin Fields over the last 18 months has trended down by about 5 picks on average across all of these. And I'm thinking to myself, as he saved football for the Big Ten and played out of his brain into the national title game? Like, that's how he trended downwards? What are we doing there?
Marshall, what do we really want in quarterbacks? Like, do you want a guy who is incredibly accurate, an elite athlete, and apparently got into Harvard? Do you really want that on your team? Who would want that?
Yeah.
Who would before we go, what's his name in Jacksonville? Urban Meyer was talking about the 3 quarterbacks he looked at for number 1.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and he said all 3 names, Justin Fields. Yeah. No one else is mentioning Mac Jones at 2 or 1 or even 4, 5, 6, 7. If it's Mac
Meyer's
Jones, I'm going to lose it.
Urban Meyer is a bleep disturber, though. Like, he's just doing that to make other organizations try to look dumb, part of me feels like, because I could totally just see him straight face going, I wouldn't have considered Mac Jones. I mean, who would do that? I mean, that sounds ridiculous. Like, we'll see where it goes. But I will be sitting on the couch with a Sawdust City beer, enjoying that. Of course, you can too by visiting their website, sawdustcitybeer.com, and check out all their wide variety of brews. Use the promo code CFP and get free shipping during checkout on all orders over $100. DT, fun as always, brother. Thank you for this, and I hope we didn't piss off too many people with draft busts.
Yeah, I apologize to all the Winnipeg fans because it's been some lean in the early teens. Woo!
Thanks for following along. Thanks for listening. As always, at CF Perspective is where you can find us. Coming up on Thursday, head coach of the Wilfrid Laurier Golden Hawks, Michael Faulds, is going to be joining Konar and Wade. So check out that show coming up for you tomorrow right here in the Canadian Football Perspective podcast feed. We will talk to you coming up next week. Thanks for tuning in.